cooperation. You know, the IRIS infrastructure is not yet an official European body. It's just an European project for preparing that. So we are in a transitional phase. And that is good, because as we are in a transitional and planning phase, we can plan accordingly to have more impact for global cooperation, and that is one of the missions of the infrastructure. And so for us, it's very, very important to have this kind of exchanges, because we can see and touch which is the real problematic, the real problems that we can share. As I said yesterday, cooperation, scientific cooperation in heritage science is sharing the problems to find common solutions. It is what we expect to achieve. We don't want to promote good solution from Europe in case we can import good practice from Mexico. We share the problems and we share the solutions, then everything else comes rather natural. This is what science is telling us. So, let's start with this panel, and before I give the word to the speakers, I would like to anticipate to the speaker, which is my question to everybody of them, so they have a few seconds of time for thinking and answer. My question to the panelists today is, can you give one item, one proposal to make this cooperation effective, real, to kickstart this cooperation between the involved infrastructure for heritage science research? So this will be the question that I will ask the panelists, but I will ask the same question to all of you, because we are in an open discussion here, and we want to gather recommendation, ideas, kind of a brainstorming, to see if we are able to build a real list of items to do in the next weeks, months, or years. So, to give time to my panelists to think and answer, I will tell you what I did, because I'm rather pragmatic. So, my 2 cents for this cooperation and for making it real. This morning, I wrote to the 17 European nodes of the next integrating activity, the Hyperion CH. The Hyperion HS, so the follow-up of Hyperion CH. We are trying to make a very good proposal. We will work not by single facility institution, we are working by national nodes. We have 16 national nodes in Europe plus Israel in this moment interested, participating to this proposal. To this group of 17 national coordinators, including Emilio Cano here from Spain, and he received the mail, so he checked. I wrote this morning introducing the 3 American nodes which we want to involve in the same proposal, which are Brazilian node with Antecipa Consortium, coordinated by Luis Souza. Unfortunately, Luis is not here, but we have here the US node in the West Coast, which is the Getty Conservation Institute, which will be coordinated by Tom Lerner, and the LANSIC UNAM node here in Mexico, coordinated by Jose Luis Rubalcaba. So I introduced these 3 nodes and 3 people, 3, let's say, national coordinators outside Europe to the European group. So, and from now on, we will exchange mail for preparing the project in the next 108 days, separating us from the deadline. For the next 108 days, we will exchange mail copying all the nodes, including non-European nodes. Of course, we will verify that everything is feasible. By the way, Monique Bossi is here with us. She will do the verification with the Commission about because it's not easy to have to do with the European bureaucracy in European projects especially. So we know that we cannot provide money, and so we don't want to provide troubles. So we are trying to solve positioning troubles of these 3 institutions by helping with the coordination office of the infrastructure. So that is my first step. we stay in the same proposal of the integrating activity together, which will be, if applied, a very important integrating activity, because this will directly lead the scientific group into the European Consortium in 2021. Well, let's start in distance order. So, dear Michael, what can you say? Which is your piece of proposal for this cooperation? You are fascinated by America. I know that. You speak Spanish, so you are one of... I know that you're interested in this, in making this cooperation real.
Okay, thank you, Luca. Well, that's true that estoy encantado de México. But actually, I think I can say really something that works because we have the example that works already. I was looking for some possibilities, like officially, of cooperating with Mexico, contacting the embassy, Mexican embassy in Prague and the Czech embassy in Mexico, and I didn't get any answer. And then we decided with the guys that I know here that we have to look for the possibilities which we have to do something on our own, let's say. And there is a lot of support from the UNAM, from the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, for the exchanges and for this collaboration, which I find very good because in terms of this, we were able to welcome a Mexican student in our lab in September. We could welcome there two Mexican doctors, Dr. Leopoldo Ruiz Huerta and Dr. Alberto Caballero Ruiz. And we could also make some measurements there directly in touch, from which we are now preparing already publications. So that's one point that I would like to say, that if there is the personal interest, it is possible to find the ways how to realize it. And it is even possible now, so without the framework of the infrastructure. When there is the infrastructure, what I see here is that all the people which were talking here today have interest in collaboration. So I think this is a good background for the things to happen, I have to say. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that talking about the cultural heritage, we are a little bit limited because of the distance. There will be a big problem of transporting any samples from Mexico or from Latin America to Europe and vice versa. So what really I think is possible and makes sense is the exchange of the academic staff, to get some experience abroad, to go to the laboratory which has something that doesn't have the laboratory of the interested person, and so on. And this is definitely possible. If it is possible to define within the Hyperion HS, for example, some way, some official way which would make easier sending the real artifacts for the investigations in different labs, it would be really great. Of course, there is also this MoLab, so it means the mobile laboratory, and I think it is possible to make some real research, in situ research, with the equipments that you take abroad, which is, I think, easier than to take the historical artifacts abroad. Well, so basically that's it. So I just would like to conclude that if there is the will, it is possible, as I could see. So if I was looking for the bilateral projects and these cooperations, I was not successful. But then, for the enthusiasm of the people that wanted to cooperate, we found ways and programs here in the UNAM which allow, and in CONACYT, which allowed us realize the exchanges and make the measurements. And now, but it was not in the culture heritage field. And now we are already preparing the publications.
Well, so you recommend researchers' mobility, but in a certain sense you escaped the focus of the question, because you didn't propose a special solution, just a generic goodwill. That is, okay, we have generic goodwill, we are here, but we need specific ideas to go on. And all that I get is that you are recommending more researchers' mobility and academic personnel mobility between, for instance, Lansing here and IRIS facilities in Europe. That is great, and that is probably also part of our program to increase the international exchange of personnel. And in the immediate? Okay, it's for your second round. Well, you are getting the knack of what we are trying to do. Tibor, what is your, do you have any smart idea for the immediate of this cooperation?
Well, thank you very much. The turn, I'm a little bit more optimistic when it concerns the bilateral relations, how to upgrade, how to move for further, more concrete cooperations on this specific field between Mexico and Europe. I can mention for this aim two certain phenomena. Hereby, I have a photo that was made 10 minutes before through that a Mexican colleague announced me that here in the UNAM bulletin announced the possible way how to concur for scholarships to the program which is functioning between Mexico and Hungary very well, Stipendium Hungaricum. 6 years ago, I was working here as a diplomat in our embassy, and I was able to build up and to sign this cultural, educational agreement between Hungary and Mexico. So this is one concrete point to see over in your bulletin, because there are points which can coincide with the aim of somebody, because it's mentioned that arts and cultural heritage is in the program where you can be a candidate. The other, what I wanted to mention, and which makes me more optimistic in the bilateral cooperation, more optimistic than amical, it's that last week Hungarian government accepted a opening loan for the sum of 2 billions of Hungarian florins in order to help with the reconstruction works after the last September earthquake in 2 very important cultural heritage buildings of Mexico. One of them is a church in the district of Juarez, of the capital, Corazón de Jesús, si no me equivoco, the name of this church. The other one is in Tepoztlán, which is a very ancient heritage, because it was among those first monasteries that were built up after some years of the Spanish entered from Veracruz to Mexico. So these are 2 programs, but as far as Luca wanted to listen to some very concrete points, what I can suggest, so I don't want to avoid his question. I think we have the possibility, and And as I am not a physician, I am a diplomat, so I am sometimes a little bit more than necessary, but I think this moment is necessary. I am thinking on a possible, potential diplomatic way, how and what we can or may promote in Europe because of two reasons. This year is the year of the cultural heritage in Europe. This year, when the High Commissioner, Lady Mogherini, led a very important European delegation in Brussels at mid-July, if I'm not wrong, and it was also politically declared that there are very good and very stable relations between the CELAC and European partners in the cooperation of great many fields. So I think if on one point we are able to handle a suggestion, a diplomatic, scientific diplomatic suggestion to the Commissioner of Cultural Heritage in the Commission in Europe, promoting a good aim, targets of what we should be able commonly to develop, to create, to establish. This is the very moment, because before ending the cultural heritage year of this December, always there are chances, possibilities to go further on. So it's a kind of habit in the European Commission practice to accept at finally of the year conclusions which are getting further on, which are taking advantage of the past positive events that we have. Of course, we can show out that we began to build in this road, and at the same time we are able to draw, to show a kind of roadmap for the next 1 or 2 years at least, what we want to do. So I would be very happy, very glad if I would contribute and would work out together with all the presents here something which is showing to the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Tibor. As you mentioned diplomacy, I take the chance of introducing our attaché at the Italian Embassy, Emilia Giorgetti. She is here we are very pleased to have her this evening, to this discussion especially. Yes, it's great. Even if the European Year of Cultural Heritage is going to finish in Vienna, I think in 7 days with the final event. But we can build on that, I think. And yes, about the EU-LAC cooperation, we are still following, and I will speak later about this, as we are still following the development, because the situation is not final for what concerns that cooperation. So this is one of my personal action items. I will be in Brussels next week, and I will try to assess what is the situation, and I will follow up with news. We still hope to have some special place in this cooperation, or formal or informal, we will see. So I noted that, and now for Marta. Marta, you are our integration director in the infrastructure.
So I should
How we
integrate.
do integrate?
I should integrate as much as possible. But first, I would like to say that I am very glad to be here. I'm very impressed by the activity at the Mexican Node, the range of expertise that I have realized there is, the range of important items you are studying, the techniques, the MOLAB. I was impressed by these MOLAB activities you are carrying out, and the capabilities of, with what you have established, you have been doing a lot of networking, proving that the sum of the individual parts is not just the sum, it adds more, no? So I think in that respect, I am very glad that I came and realized that and see all your efforts. This is first thing. Second thing is that knowing people is very important. So now we have faces, we know each other, and then this is always, it adds value to every scientific, technical interaction. And so for the more concrete things, what we have now immediately an instrument that we can use to strengthen these possibilities of collaboration is that you may use as much as possible of this proposal we are preparing that is going to be called Hyperion HS. And I have listed the kind of things that, because the project is being built, your input is good now that you are going to be, say, members of this consortium. You have the possibility to put your interest, the fields in where you are, you are interested, the activities in where you would think you would benefit, and you also would be able to say, give your positive things to the community, no? Because you have particularities that the whole community can take advantage of. So I would suggest, please give suggestions for research activities that you think you are interested. Please keep an eye on the training activities that will be designed for this proposal, because you can implement the needs you have, the needs of training your community has. And it was highlighted, I think, by Michael today, training of the users, training of the students, training of the people running the facilities. So all these training needs you can suggest. And also take advantage of the training activities that will be carried out within this consortium. So if you have students, you can send to these training schools or personnel that can be trained. Another thing that has been discussed these days, these 2 days, and you can have really take advantage of the running activities for preparing this proposal is there is a working group on DG Lab on digital aspects. So join this working group and also follow up what is the developments of this platform, of digital platform. And also in the future, maybe for the present Hyperion project is a bit too late, but for the future, use the facilities. I mean, because it's possible. These European facilities are open to international access, so use the facilities for your own advantage. And so that would be my point. Use this opportunity that we are now creating, the InfraIACOL. And then there is one other thing I should say, and we mentioned, is bilateral collaboration. It's obvious that between Mexico and Spain there should be many scientific, there has been, and there's future for that. And for that, I propose that we establish Skype meeting date in where we learn what are the bilateral opportunities, bilateral exchange opportunities. So that would be my 2 suggestions.
Thank you. Thank you, Marta. Some concrete ideas, even if you borrowed one from me, the Infraia, but also the
Yeah, but I developed.
the
I
digital,
developed.
and especially the participation to the joint elaboration of the joint research activities. Even I love your optimism because you give the project for approved, but we will need to
Well.
submit the proposal, and then we hope that it will be funded. Well, thanks. Now we enter the heat of the discussion. We have La Red. Luis, your suggestion to make things real.
Okay, I have some ideas. For example, talking about this new that Tibor gave us some minutes ago about the support that the Hungarian government is providing for the reconstruction of Tepoztlán as one of the buildings damaged by the earthquake. I have thought that the lime technology is one of the fields of research that could be the bridge in between Europe and Mexico. The fact is that it was a very well developed technology in Mexico before the 16th century. Pre-Hispanic buildings and architecture used a lot of lime to make so many things. You already know them. The interesting thing is that in 16th century, the technology from Europe came, and it was a mixture, or in some cases, displacement of the technology, and the technology with two-chamber ovens arrived, and it was a change mainly in the central part of Mexico by that time. So the interesting thing is that most of the interventions that has been done up to now in the buildings damaged by the earthquake do not have scientific studies concerning the lime technology used in 16th century. Perhaps this building in Tepoztlán could be one of the opportunities to make this kind of studies before the real or the present intervention. I don't know, perhaps it is not possible, but I feel that under these new conditions and after this share of information that Tibor provides us, could be good time to try to involve all this scientific power here in this room, working in some specific project that needs the information prior the intervention of the architects or the civil engineers. Could be good idea. Let's see. Another interesting thing is the taking into consideration the difficulty of exchanging pieces to study through the Atlantic Ocean. It is advisable to look for pieces that are in both parts of the For example, ancient documents. There is a very important project that the Art History Institute and Tatiana Falcone is working on, and it is the comparative study of manuscripts in Berlin and Cracovia that have a counterpart in the Archivo General de la Nación and the National Museum of Anthropology here in Mexico. This kind of comparative studies could be a good way to begin with, because there are perhaps the same the parts of the same document in two different places, and can be studied with the instruments in both sides assuming that there are some agreement in the protocols and the conditions for the analysis. That could be one of the things that we could look for. And ancient documents, there are a lot of in Seville and many other libraries in Europe that could be studied in this way. But here we have the beginning of this kind of studies, and it seems that the collaboration with the German team and the Mexican team is in good way, and perhaps we will soon have good results. Perhaps Tatiana will be able to let us know a little bit more in detail about this. The third idea is that perhaps we can do some studies in both sides with paintings in colonial times. But there is one thing that could be interesting: the mural paintings, fragments that should be in different museums in Europe, could be studied in the same way that the fragments we have here in Mexico. Perhaps, again, if we get the same protocols, the same instruments, and make comparable the results of the studies, these mural paintings could be one interesting material to work on. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis. So if I get the general idea that you propose is pilot research, pilot studies focused on specific problems. That's good. Even if we need to ask ourselves, okay, well, how do we fund these pilot projects? But if we have ideas, is the first step, and is good enough. We keep this for the remainder of the remaining of the discussion. Last but not least, Jose Luis.
Okay, thank
your
you.
voice.
Yes, just thinking, going on more examples about the things that Luis has already talked. I would like to think, for instance, we have also some collection of European painters in Mexico, like in Museo San Carlos. Since you have a lot of experience in these kind of paintings, this could be a point, thinking on European collections or objects that are in Mexico that can be also studied in the same way, as well as the Mexican collection that are in European archives and museums, for instance. This is also another possibility. Not only things on the Mexican object, but also in the European object that we have here. So this could be also interested. There are many possibilities in this approach. Of course, we think a lot on Mesoamerican objects or pre-Hispanic objects. That could be one of the topics that are always important for Mexico. I have also other ideas thinking on training, because we can, I think the idea to have this node in Mexico is that, as we are trying to do, integrate efforts from different institutions. Like, for instance, in the case of training, we could think in these schools or on very specific topics in collaboration with the School of Conservation that may provide some original objects. We provide the instruments, and we can have this training on site already on different kind of materials and problems. And this can range from paintings, of course, to textiles, metals, and other things. I think that one of the interesting topics that we may develop with this collaboration is the modern art, because you have paintings and materials that we don't really know. In particular, in Mexico, there are some recipes that were prepared perhaps only here, like this Dr. Adel Rivera and other very famous painters, Mexican painters. And this kind of objects, because we face this problem, has not been studied. So, and there are mixtures, complex mixtures of materials, organic and pigments and other things that we don't know that are difficult to study. So this is the kind of challenging problems that we may face concerning the idea to develop or use the limits of the techniques to check the damage that we can produce on the materials, that this is important. So we have 4 schools of conservation in different parts of Mexico, so we can duplicate this experience in different regions in order to take the expert to the different regions. And of course, in different regions mean different objects and different problems. So concerning the round robin, I think this is something that we really need to do. I think Mexico can provide reference materials that some kind of, let's say, objects are problems that you don't have in Europe. So this could be interesting for you. And yes, and as well, we may have some of your reference that we can study with the methods and make the comparison. So I think this is something that we can do with very few money. And there is also this idea of joint projects. And these are some of the topics that can be developed in, let's say, together. Already, since it was just beside me, he take notes of all my ideas. And not yet. I have other things here. I think that the access to the instruments. I think that we can open the access to our instruments as well for people from European projects that would like to study something in Mexico, because we are thinking in our problems, but we don't know what they want to study. So to have a list of problems that they are interested on, and perhaps we are not interested, it's important to know what they want to do or what they would like to do in Mexico, or also concerning the collection that you have in the States. I'm sure with the Getty could be also a very important road to access to collections and for them to make comparative studies for this object that you have in the States from Mexico. So there are 2 ways to work. I think that's it.
Thank you, Jose Luis. It's an interesting set of proposals that we have here. But I feel there's still something which has been discussed in these days is missing. Let's see if some interesting proposal is coming now from the public. I see several people who I think should have good proposal if they want to speak. So who's going to break the ice from the public? Where is the microphone? Where is the microphone, by the way? Okay, perfect.
Sandra has already the microphone.
So we have microphones. Do we have also proposals?
Isabel. Apriétale ahí, on, se pone verde.
I was following Luis' proposal on Mesoamerican collections that are in Europe, and I'm very interested in 19th century archaeology. And I know that there is a very interesting collection in Hungary that is in the Horthy Museum, that it's quite large. It represents a type of collection story that is very interesting because of the character, and also it's a quite broad collection of artifacts, and I think that it will be very interesting to do something about them, because most of these objects lack of provenance, and I think that perhaps studying and comparing analogic collections in Mexico, we can provide also information for the museum and the collection is really something else. And I think that considering that Hungary is kind of opening for these proposals, I think that it's something that could be easily done. Another interesting proposal is that actually the Horti collections has some casts of artifacts, of pre-Hispanic artifacts. I mean, molds and reproductions. And this is kind of a very interesting project because 3D printing today is really like growing up, but casts are really the archaeology of these techniques. And actually, we don't know a lot about these techniques. And there are many, many objects and many, many collections in Europe that are casts of Mesoamerican objects that are about to have, I don't know, 100 years old. They perhaps have material questions and also decay questions, and of course conservation, because many of these artifacts perhaps are in better shape than the originals. So there is a whole new word for reproductions of reproductions. So I think that perhaps this is an area of colliding interesting between archaeology, conservation, modern art. I don't know, I think that there is something in this area that perhaps we can think about, and I think that also Getty must have some casts and really everywhere else.
Thanks. If we stay here for another 15 minutes, we have a scientific program for some years, over which we can build 10 conferences about conferences. Well, frankly, I think that to put this cooperation on solid basis, I think we need also to have more exchange, not just of personal, but also scientific exchange. So joint conferences should be in the program, addressing the major aspect of the cooperation which we want to consider. Nobody cited, but I know that it's there. Cooperating on digital data management. Just this topic requires a lot of research, but also requires a lot of agreements, how to use the digital data on both sides. Otherwise, we come to non-interoperable solutions. So, yes, it is also more networking that we need, not just more science. Anyone on this line?
Just to abound on what Jose Luis said about modern art, that I already said that, yes, these kind of mixtures of materials that Jose Luis was saying about copal resins and waxes and all that, they developed it in Europe, no? Based on Delacroix painting, no? So these materials were in use during 19th century and early 20th century in Europe. And for example, I think that some circles in Paris should be interesting for Mexico, like Modigliani, Severini, no? People that were working with Rivera, no? So we could like, and well, there are several Diego Rivera from the Cubist period in European museums, no? He had a lot of contacts with Denmark and no, with also many in Spain and in Paris, no? So I think yes, modern materials, but not only in paintings. That could be, as they had been said. I mean, not only easel paintings, but also I think that the return to order brought a lot of the interest in mural painting, no? In Europe, there is a lot of mural painting in Italy from the period between wars, no, and also in the United States that follow they have a lot of Rivera, no, paintings. So probably that could be an area of interest, because I think imaging there, no, I felt very promising the thing you did with tomography for looking to porosity, no? How to really, because we have, I don't know, like we have standard techniques, but probably we should develop more another kind of procedures for really, no, investigating and diagnosing big objects, no?
Thank you. Thank you. There's one proposal there.
Well, I'm not sure if this is a proposal. It's just sharing a bit more about what Luis was talking about, the joint project on Mexican manuscripts with Germany. Because this project, in a sense, has had to resolve some of the questions that you are pointing at. Money, how do we get the money from? How do we share not only the problem, but the solutions? So, for instance, the manuscripts that are in Germany were from Alexander von Humboldt. Next year is his anniversary. So Germany has a lot of money for the celebrations on Humboldt. And in that sense, the German group is already receiving money from those celebrations. But the German Cultural Institute in Mexico and in Latin America in general has a lot of money and resources for celebrating the anniversary and Humboldt's pass through America, and there is not much projects asking for this money.
Oh, great.
So it's time for us to say, hey, no, we're here and we're doing this joint research, help us in traveling and expenses, etc. But I think that one of the nice things of these projects being that we started not only with the same object that we wanted to study that happens to be split in two, which is very lucky, but that's not very common. But in order to be able to do that, what we are sharing and the standpoint of the project is to share samples so that the Mexican team and the European team can run tests on those samples and then be able to compare the results of the studies from whatever they're doing with their manuscripts and what we are doing. So we don't have to go there and they don't have to come here. The samples are the things that travel, even though we have had the good luck, the Germans have come here and we will be there as well. But if we think of problems in this way, we are not only sharing our knowledge as individuals, but I think that it's very nice and very enriquecedor, no sé cómo se dice en inglés, that we compare results. It's a good practice, I think, that different research groups share the results of their studies. And so I think that this could be a way of not only learning, but sharing and having this common collaborative way of working.
Thank you. This is actually what we do most of time also in European cooperation in the joint research activity, because Europe is small, but not that small. And so very often we move the samples as well in round robin and other test situations. This already happened and still happening in the joint research part of the Hyperion CH. I think it's a good idea, and thank you for the suggestion about the Humboldt celebration, because it's a suggestion about where to find money, and that's an important part of the game. So, before I launch myself in resuming what has been told, what has been said until now, I have a question related to a situation that is going on in Brazil. I've been invited to a conference in Bahia next September, which is the Luso Brasileiro conference on built heritage in Bahia, colonial built heritage. But the point is not in the topic of the conference, is in the Luso Brasileiro conference. So we have here the two coordinators of the two unique networks of heritage, one in Spain and one in Mexico, so Techno Heritage and La Red. Shall we wait so much to see the Hispano-Mexican conference organized first, like the Brazilians and the Portuguese are doing since years? That's my direct question to you both.
Okay. it's an idea, of course. I mean, we
It's
are
just to
having-
run things in
No,
Spanish.
yeah,
so
yeah,
if you're
we are
not-
having next year in March 2019. We are having the Techno Heritage Conference. It's the international conference organized by our network. It doesn't have a specific focus or purpose on any country or any relation with any specific network. But so at this point, it is too late
Yeah, of course.
to organize nothing specifically. We were talking yesterday with Luis that of course we can try to establish some communication and collaboration between our two networks. I think we have a lot of experiences and things that can be shared. We haven't yet fixed a date or something like that, but we were talking yesterday about establishing some communication first by Skype or something like that to try to formalize this relation. The idea of organizing a joint conference, it's an idea that can be developed. I think we cannot, probably it is too bold to commit ourselves to do that in a specific date, but it is something that at least from our side, and I'm sure also on the Mexican side, we can consider and try to develop. It might be a good idea, not for the next year, maybe it is too close, but not too far in the future, we can try to manage to do something in this way.
Luis?
I could say something that perhaps if I have the chance to visit you during your next conference, and we usually have our meeting around September, October in the next year, and would be enough time to invite you and perhaps a group of your colleagues from your network to be part of this as the second approach, and in the following year we could
2020.
think in something else doing together. Yeah,
Would be great.
okay.
So let me note that if this is organized within the time framework of the possibly new integrating activity, could be jointly organized also by the project. So a few more plane tickets just to add to the balance.
But, if I can add, we are going to have this Techno Heritage Conference in March, but we have every 2 years.
Yeah, usually it's every 2 years,
so we
our conference. So
We
it
could
is,
think,
I agree with Luis. It can be a good idea if Luis can visit us in this conference. It will take place in March.
in Seville. No, but what I was going to say, Emilio, is that for the next conference,
Yeah.
we can organize in such a way in where the exchange with Mexico takes an important part, say,
Yeah, definitely.
developing the conference with a particular session, or we can think in ways, thinking in the next conference, and we can have co-sponsoring from IRIS or from
Hyperion
other...
HS or something like that. Yeah, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it is also. I know that our Ministry of Science is specifically interested in relations with Latin America in general, then with Mexico, specifically with Mexico. So it is just. I think we have a very good framework or very good scenario to develop this collaboration.
Also regarding this collaboration, I outline it very briefly, but there is the question of the training activities and exchange of students, and we should work out which are the frameworks, legal frameworks, or between institutions for students to be exchanged, to do part of their PhD, because there are several initiatives in this. I know, but we have to do some research on what are the opportunities. So I would say let's allow ourselves, I don't know, 3 months or something like that, to get to know in each node what are the opportunities, because I mean, we are receiving Mexican students, not in the field of cultural heritage, but other activities, other research activities we carry out. We have had Mexican students, so why don't we use these possibilities?
Yes, and I would like to say that the UNAM has a house, an office in Madrid, so it's another way to try to find some resources to exchange people and students. I also would like to consider that in Mexico, we are having a lot of how you say, events and meetings on cultural heritage. For instance, in the last month, we have about almost one or several days meetings on different topics. So we may try to profit of this, to bring someone from the networks to come and to give a talk or to have a workshop with this, they invite people. So perhaps we just need to focus more the resources on the people of the network. And I also would like to comment concerning other parts or other topics of the meeting, the digital data. We were talking and we consider that we need to find an expert from our side that could join this working group, but someone that is really in the field, and try to work with him or to them, and then connect these people to the working group. And I also would like to say that we may start to work to promote this ARC lab policy. That is also very interesting. Access to the archives. We need to go to the museums and talk to the people, explaining what's the idea behind this ARC lab, this access to the archives and to the collections, in order to try to use this idea that is also very interesting.
Thank you. So, is it time to resume what has been said before we go for the last round of interventions? Yes. So there are a lot of material for cooperation, or a lot of ideas, starting from the more political, so diplomatic actions, as it was suggested, and in particular insisting on the EU-LAC formal cooperation and the development between Europe and Latin American countries. We know that the game is still open. We know that maybe we will end up in a formal position. What we surely know is that the Commission is interested in heritage science as one of the topic of this cooperation, even if usually and traditionally is not, almost never in the range of bilateral exchanges, heritage science. But I think it will be more in the future. And so this is a very good suggestion, but we will keep an eye on the evolution, because also this group, and in particular Immaculada Figueroa, she has to submit the InfraSoup for this cooperation in March. So we will know in a very quick time which will be the rules of engagement, if any, for heritage science in this. Anyway, as I told you, I will make a short verification with the Commission next week in Brussels. Then the other big thing on the table is the new integrating activity project, Hyperion HS, to which you are already being invited formally, and now is the definition of joint research activity topics. But I think that we already have someone, because this topic on reference materials and the use of round robin is, I think, already of interest for Europeans, so we can easily extend this outside Europe. And I think it will not be so difficult, Marta, to have this as one of the joint research activities in the new project. So we already have one proposal, yeah. Then this point about mobility of researchers and of scholars and academic personnel. Yes, that is good, but the suggestion coming from Hungary is that we may be performing a bit of scouting in bilateral national agreements, because we count 25 countries. How many of the countries in our project have bilateral agreements with Mexico that we can use for an IRIS cooperation? That is very hard to answer, but it will need a bit of scouting on the level of our national coordinators or national groups to understand if they have some preferential program over which to have exchanges of personnel and academic staff with Mexico. That could be an interesting exercise to run in the next months. Then we have the training. So it's not just joint research activity, but also about programs of training. We heard very clearly the need for online training modules, but we already have that solution. By the way, the cluster Parthenos developed a lot of online training modules for humanities, but the cluster is still there. We are trying to see if we can develop some modules also for heritage. Of course, initially they are, if you go and there, you look, there is a training module for understanding what European research infrastructures are, things like that, because it's an European project after all. But thinking about that, there are also very successful models for humanities. We can derive that example, and as Emilio offered, this could be also directly made in Spanish from using our cooperation network. So the use of experts from IRIS in Mexico, yes, is welcome. If you have the chances of inviting people from the infrastructure, it's important that we make this, in a certain sense, visible. That is not a personal relationship, but something passing through the infrastructure to reinforce the cooperation, so it can be listed in the joint events, even if it's a small seminar given by an expert from Mexico in Europe or from Europe in Mexico. We need to take care, because the formal relationship, we already have a lot of personal or institutional relationship in this infrastructure. Is made of so many people and institutions that, and all these people, they have international cooperation at very high level. The fact is that we never think of connecting the personal relationship with the institutional relationship, and so it disappears. This is why we need to organize things to show that we are cooperating, and to reach the diplomatic level, we cannot go the personal interaction. We need to create system and to let those systems interact. Then, of course, thank you for considering to send Mexican expert or experts to the working group we are creating on digital problems, because it's very, very, very important. I also invite people from Brazil. My idea is still to create this special group within the framework of the Research Data Alliance Forum, but for that I need to have formally appointed the coordinator of DigiLab. For the moment we are still discussing. We don't have a name. We will have it in February possibly, and we will invest the coordinator with the task of keeping the working group together and of inserting this working group into the Research Data Alliance Forum, which is very convenient because it's also another time, it's a matter of visibility. If you do this discussion in a working group is something. If the working group is formalized in the Research Data Alliance, the discussion becomes open to other countries, becomes really global, and I don't think we have anything to hide. About access, also interesting initiative. Access to, my vision of access is stupid to bring the MOLAB across the ocean, but your vision of access, okay, if you European researchers want to do studies on Mexican objects, these instruments are here. That is the good way of using access, but this is implying that you set up a research infrastructure like IRIS is in Europe, because that service can only be provided by a working research infrastructure, including our club, as you said, which I think is a very nice solution to have a better relationship with museums, with conservation institutions, because they feel important in the game, and they are important because a lot of material they have and is fundamental for studying heritage science. So, we spoke about the cooperation at the level of the Mexican and Spanish network. That is good. If we are capable, we are not in a hurry. If you are able to organize something for 2020, it would be great, or even 2021, who knows. Then we have a lot of scientific proposals, but really a lot. I listed at least 8 topics for scientific cooperation. Well, great. This is something of a program. For this to become effective, we need to find resources. Resources could be also in kind, so don't apply for extra funding, but seeing what it can be done with what you have at your disposal in your institutions. That is something that can be explored. To put this in practice, it's a bit more difficult because we would need responsible taking care of exploring this. Otherwise, it's just a generic declaration. Okay, we could cooperate in this and that, but who's going to collect these topics that I have under my nose and trying to connect these topics into real bilateral projects? That is my question. Oh, maybe this question is good for the last round.
Okay, I may comment that we can start to make work the nodes of our network. So there are some people that has to take care of different topics with the different working groups in the Mexican labs. So perhaps they can provide this information, and they can be also coordinate the action. So I think it could be an idea. And also, I think we were thinking about the topics. I forgot to mention the glaze, the azulejos and talavera that we have here is a problem that we would like also to take to another level. And I think with Spain could be a very easy topic to develop in cooperation.
Yeah, great. We could make something like a call for expression of interest inside IRIS on our side and in Mexico on your side. We define a list of topics we mostly have. We have also a science director, Marta, so we can involve the science director of IRIS into this to try to connect institutions across real ideas and see who is answering the call. That could be attempted at least. It's quite something that we can attempt in very quickly.
Yes, as simple as that. As all these ideas that have come out, and I would add some more. For instance, with Sandra, we were discussing about the safe limits, which is something that you can do with your own instruments, I can do with mine, and we can compare. Yes. This is an interesting and, well, it's quite straightforward. And maybe other ideas. So, shall I propose something like you collect all the ideas that are here and send, produce like a document with everything, and we can, you can send it to me and I can send it to our science director or directly to our science director within IRIS.
Perfect.
I would say that just try to put it in such a way that is a heritage question.
Yes.
Research question behind the thing.
Yes, I have something important to say on this point. I will personally defend the continuation, the prosecution of the safe boundary study in the new project because it's fundamental also for our relationship with the International Atomic Agency, which, by the way, could be a very nice sources of funding for things like schools, etc. We are just organizing a school in Italy next year about the use of neutron for cultural heritage, which will be co-funded by the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency. So I think that topic will need to remain, and considering that is of interest also outside Europe, and actually the Atomic Agency is acting on a global level, yes, that would be something to explore for the future.
One more thing. So this is very concrete and very easy. You produce this document and send to IRIS, to me or to Loic Bertrand, but then I have for the training activities that we have to organize for this call. Yes. Maybe the same thing can be done, and this can be channeled either to you or to Matija Strilic. That is, what are the specific needs of your community regarding training of as we said, the researchers, the facility staff. What are your needs? What would be the kind of schools, summer schools or workshops or things, hands-on activities you would like to have in the next few years? And then if we are lucky, we do it with Infrayacol. If not, we will be doing some in-kind kind of approaches. But so two documents we expect from you. One on GRAs, joint research activities, and one on training needs.
Okay, yes.
That is
Well,
quite manageable.
Great.
I
Any
would say.
more intervention? Any more?
I will be a little bit stereotypic, but I still rely a lot on the exchange of the scientists, of the scholars, and of the students, because it can induce the further cooperation. But I see a little bit problem, at least on my side, that the system of support is a little bit not too transparent for me if I am going to the pages of CONACYT, to UNAM, and to the possibilities in Mexico. It's not saying that it is not well done or well structured. It is just saying that for me, as for a foreign person which doesn't know what are the relationships between all these institutions, what are the possibilities. It would be very nice if we could receive maybe time to time, or maybe once, the basic overview of the possibilities for the Mexican people interested to go to Europe, because then we could know, okay, so we want to cooperate in some regard, we want to invite somebody, and now what are the possibilities on the Mexican side of the funding? Sometimes we got, and you as well, of course, mails like possibility of cooperation with Japan, for example. And kind of these messages, at least to me, regarding Mexican possibilities never come. And maybe when we are now here planning the cooperations, this could be a good basic stone for seeing the opportunities at all, I mean.
Yes, one comment on my side, because I forgot, about all these potential pilot actions. I would like to recommend not to underestimate the potential of the huge network IRIS has got in Europe. So if you need to access objects, libraries for your research, either two cases. They are already part of the IRIS national network in that country. They are not part, but you can pass through the IRIS national node, if we have that in that country, to facilitate the approach with the institution that are needed for your projects of cooperation. So we at the coordination office do this kind of matchmaking for building European project partnership. And of course, if we should realize that there are chances for partners outside Europe in future European programs, we will tell you as soon as the call is issued to see if it's possible to build partnership containing extra-European partners. By funding them, not just for on a voluntary basis, like this time for the Infraia, that is not possible. But sometimes it is possible. So
there is another thing that has been arise, that is in some of the institutions that belong to the Mexican network, they may have joint graduate programs with European universities. So this could be also an opportunity, like we may have also in the UNAM, to have some impact in heritage science, trying to focus on training on graduate people. So this is also an idea that we may consider, in particular with, I think, with Spain and France, and there are some programs already running on different universities.
thanks, it's a good suggestion. So also scouting for joint graduation programs, not just for bilateral agreements existing between the countries in IRIS and Mexico. Well, some more comments or questions from the public? No, I don't know what time we were supposed to finish, but I think this is the time. Yeah? What do you think, José Luis? We are supposed to finish at this time? But, well, tenemos un plano. We have a plan, I think. It's a lot of things to do. So Christmas is approaching fast. Let's think about, actually the first deadline are really close because we are discussed, it's the deadline for the submission of the project is March, so I recommend you to participate to the definition of these joint research activities, otherwise you will not have voice in this new plan. Oh well, do you want to close, José Luis?
Yes.
Close the day. Thank you for hosting this in Mexico on my side, on behalf of all the IRIS group and the Hyperion group as well. We are very pleased to be here, personally for the second time in 3 years. And I need to express my wonder for all the development that I noticed through these last 2 years and a half, actually. So you all did an excellent job, and I really feel that, as I told you, we really can have a peer-to-peer cooperation in heritage science. So I feel very happy about this, and I hope that this cooperation becomes concrete in the next years. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you. For us also, it has been very glad to have you here and to share, to have the opportunity to talk about different issues about heritage science. And we are really happy that we may have the chance to cooperate and to be part of this very important network. That is really something that is an achievement that for Mexico is really important. And I hope we will see you very soon in Mexico, and you may try some more Mexican food.
Starting from tomorrow.
Thank you very
Starting from
much.
tomorrow.
Thank you.